welcome to the third annual event of the Women's Voices series at LMU. Let's first thank Dr. Charlotte Devlin for the enchanting music on erhu, a traditional instrument also known as the Chinese two-string violin. Dr. Evelyn is a visiting professor of Asian and Asian American Studies, and it's wonderful to have her. And what a beautiful entrance into tonight's program. Women's Voices of Late Imperial China. Good evening. I'm Yanjie Wang, Special Collections Instruction Librarian. Thank you all for coming and joining us tonight. It's wonderful to see all of you. The Women's Voices program is one of my personal favorites, and maybe I'm a little bit partial. I love this program because it gives us a special portal, a special entry into the lives and experience of women through their personal narratives. We learn about women who live in different times and places from different walks of life. This event is a collaboration between the Department of Asian American Studies, the Department of Theater Arts, and the William H. Hammond Library. For this, we would like to express our gratitude to Dean Robin Crabtree of Bellarmine College of Liberal Arts, Dean Brian Alexander of the College of Communications and Fine Arts, and Dean Chris Brancalini of the William H. Hammond Library. Thank you very much for supporting creativity and partnership across campus. Many, many kudos to our faculty who will lead tonight's program, Dr. Yanjie Wang, Professor of Asian and Asian American Studies, who will set the stage for the dramatic readings, and Dr. Kevin Wetmore, Professor and Chair of Theater Arts, who directed the student performance with great enthusiasm. And of course, our LMU Theater Arts student actors who will bring the women's voices alive tonight. Thank you all. Tonight's event works in conjunction with the exhibit Reimagining Each Other in the Archives and Special Collections Exhibition Gallery, and the Women's History Month, which begins today on March 1st. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Yanjie Wang. I greatly admire Professor Wang's scholarly expertise, humanistic sensitivity, and her original insight, and being a great friend. She is the ideal person to introduce the three women's narratives and set the stage for us to understand and appreciate the experience. Dr. Yanjie Wang is Assistant Professor of Chinese Literature and Cinema in the Department of Asian and Asian American Studies at LMU. She received a PhD in Eastern Asian Languages and Cultures from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, master's degree from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and a bachelor degree from Peking University in China. For me, that translates as she went to all the best schools. Her research interests include gender and sexuality, displacement, internal migration, trauma, and violence. Dr. Wang's publications have appeared in, among many, American Journal of Chinese Studies, Asian Cinema, Concentric Literary and Cultural Studies, as well as Chronoscope, Journal for the Study of Time. Professor Wang joined LMU in 2011 and has taught courses on Asian literature and cinema, in which women's voices have been a major theme. She will teach a course entitled Women in East Asia in spring 2018. Now, without further ado, please join me to welcome Dr. Yanjie Wang.
Thank you, Rachel, for your introduction. You're too kind. Thank you all for coming. I would like to thank Cynthia Bat, the head of Archive and Special Collections, for inviting me to this remarkable and exciting Women's Voices series. I'm truly honored. My appreciation to the Dean of Hammond Library, Chris Brancalini, for supporting this event, and to the event organizer, John Jackson, for your excellent organizational work. And I wanted to thank Rachel Wen for her incredible partnership throughout the process in producing this event. And also thank you so much, Professor Kevin Wetmore, and our students tonight for all your efforts to really render these narratives into dramatic performance. I think we are all looking forward to your performance. I teach Asian literature and culture courses. In these courses, I often heard students ask in very sympathetic tones, were women like slaves in old China? Were they? You're pondering, and some of you were shaking your head. So we know that this is a generalization or it's a stereotype. But indeed, when it comes to the topic of women in traditional China, there seems to exist a priori assumption of women as victims. And then the question is, what's the origin of this widespread assumption that women were universally oppressed in traditional China? While Confucian, the Chinese philosopher of the 6th century BC, certainly contributed to this perception, Confucian classics stipulate women's subordinate position and conforming manners. The familiar Confucian dictum, 3 volumes, for example, attempts to submit women to men in every stage of their life cycle. It states, quote, in her youth, she follows her father and elder brother. When married, she follows her husband. When her husband is dead, she follows her son. End of quote. Scholars have often interpreted this word follow to mean a woman's unconventional obedience to the whims of her male counterpart. This understanding conveys the impression that the Chinese gender system was built upon coercion and brute oppression. Yet, if we think about the strength and the resilience of the gender system in traditional China that managed to function so well for so long, more than 2,000 years, we ought to discern the considerable range of flexibilities women enjoyed. Okay? Women from various classes, from different regions and age groups enjoyed in reality. That is, there is a distinction between theory and practice, between what it should be and what it really is. So a woman might be deprived of her legal and formal social identity, but she would not be deprived of her individual personality and subjectivity. The tenets of Confucian ideology, however, were not the only source for the deep-seated image of the victimized women in traditional China. From its very inception, the study of Chinese women's history as a history of enslavement was integral to the nationalistic program of China's modernization. At the beginning of the 20th century, as imperial aggressions intensified, the victimized woman became the symbol of the Chinese nation itself, raped and dominated by the visual foreign powers. So women's enlightenment thus became a prerequisite for the political liberation of the nation and for China's entrance into this modern world. The political agenda of the Communist Party later on reinforced the image of the miserable feudal women. To claim credit for the liberation of women, the party and its propaganda perpetuated this view of China's past as a perennial dark age for women, patriarchal, feudal, and oppressive. This assumption of women as victims has also found ready supporters among Western readers. Kendra Mohanley argues that the prevalent construction of the third world women as victims is part of the ethnocentric feminist discourse, which privileges Western women as secular, liberated, in control of their lives. Very different from the conception of Chinese women. Today's media and cross-cultural representations often continue to portray traditional Chinese women as victimized and oppressed. In short, a confluence of divergent ideological and political traditions created and perpetuated the image of cloistered, crippled, and subservient women in old China. Although not without a grain of truth, the overwhelming popularity of the image of victimized women rests upon an analytical confusion. A confusion mistakes normative prescriptions for experienced reality. a confusion exacerbated by a lack of examination of women's own voices and their views of their own worlds. So in today's event, we focus on the voices of Chinese women of diverse class and geographical backgrounds and of different professions from the late Imperial period. So what's special about this period, which lasted from 16th century to the early 20th? Well, vast social economic changes transpired over these centuries, and these changes in turn engendered profound transformations of women's everyday life, familial and social status and responsibilities. Late Imperial China witnessed the development of a commercial society and a money economy in China. Traditional social distinctions between high and low, between merchant and gentry, male and female, constructed and suited for a self-contained agrarian society, began to collapse. So here I list a few changes that are relevant to our concern of women. First, an increasing number of families enjoyed affluence as a result of the commercial culture, and this greatly enhanced and expanded the educational opportunities for women. So women education increased women's authority as wives. It called into question the foundation of patriarchal values of women as inferior, moral, and intellectual beings. Now they are able to read and write. And second, the late Imperial China, actually in an age of mass publishing, thanks to the availability of cheaper paper, more simplified woodblock cutting, and craft specialization. This publishing boom created a reading public that ended the monopoly of the scholar official elites as authors and consumers of literary culture. Publishers targeted women readership and invited female authorship. So many educated women not only read books, but also wrote, edited, and published, thus becoming producers of culture. Of course, no matter how fast this reading public was growing, the majority of women, especially lower class family women, remained illiterate. Third, we see a growing mobility of peasants, including female peasants, who pursued new opportunities by producing goods for the market, by migrating to the budding cities, becoming hired workers. Rural women gained more economic power as they became economic producers. Not only did the commercial society transform women's way of living, their lives were also affected by China's extensive interactions and later on strained relations with the West during the late Imperial period. China's trade with European countries and Americas expanded both in terms of scale and frequency. Women were the main producers of export products such as silk and tea. Also during this period, a multitude of Western missionaries, including our beloved, most famous Italian Jesuit Matthew Ricci, arrived in China. Many missionaries anchored in rural China and opened schools for girls in the countryside. Over the course of the 19th century, especially after China's defeat in the Opium War, Western imperialism increasingly threatened the sovereignty of Imperial China. Numerous women joined the nationwide reform efforts to look for ways to strengthen the country. So with these changes and the ensuing gaps between perceived norms and actual behavior, scholars such as Susan Man and Darcy Cole challenge us to pay as much, if not more, attention to the everyday lives and self-perceptions of women as to overarching structures of domination. So today we'll hear voices of three women, a matriarch, a peddler, and a reformer. They are ordinary people, speaking to us their personal experiences and views. Whether it be a memoir, a family letter, or an essay, these excerpts reveal how each woman assumed a subject position and demonstrate a sense of agency within the confines of the patriarchal system. As we listen to these women's voices, I hope we can get close to their feelings, their thoughts, and their hearts, and understand better their conformity, their negotiation, and the challenges of gender norms and power structure. All right, thank you. This is my dramatic performance of these three voices. So the first woman we are going to encounter is Gu Ruopu. Gurupu was a 17th century poet, teacher, virtuous widow, and matriarch of the Huang family. Daughter of a notable gentry family, she married into a comparable local family, the Huang family, at the age of 15. So it was very common for women to get married at around this age, 15. Gu shared some tender moments with her husband and gave birth to 2 sons and 2 daughters before her husband passed away after a long illness. Gu received a literary education in her youth, so writes some poetry and proses. Upon her widowhood, her father-in-law decided to give her a classical education to read Confucian classics, analyze the book of rights, book of documents, and so forth, more politics and history, so that Gu could take her dead husband's place in preparing her 2 sons for the civil service examinations, the examination system implemented by the Imperial Court to select candidates for the state bureaucracy. So over the next 6 decades, Gu educated not only her sons, but also numerous women from the Gu and Huang families. After her father-in-law passed away, Gu became a matriarch of the family. In the following excerpt, you will hear her letter to her 2 sons concerning her roles in the family and a very important decision she would make. So Shang Na Dong will perform this dramatic reading of Gu's letter. So that's in white.
Ever since I married your father in 1606, I have been involved in the affairs of our family. For 26 years, I tasted all sufferings and experienced every tribulation. In fear and caution, I rose early to toil and late to ponder the day. My only thought was to avoid any mistake so that my ancestors' law will not be violated and my parents' concerned care will not be in vain. Do you suppose that I endured all the hardship because I enjoyed it? Barely 10 months after your father was born, your grandmother passed away. By the time I married into the family, poverty and illness had taken their toll on your father. Many obstacles stood in his way, and troubles assaulted him from more than one direction. On his deathbed, he merely instructed me to be frugal with his funeral, to teach you well so that you inherit his family's scholastic tradition, and to serve your grandfather with devotion to make up for his own untimely departure. Abiding by his will, I strove to be even more cautious in everything than in the previous 13 years. As if treading on the edge of an abyss or on a sheet of thin ice, I was constantly wary that one misstep would ruin the bygone elder's enterprise. After your grandfather passed away, more tribulations befell a bereaved widow and her 2 sons. It is not easy to recount them one by one in public. I gave birth to my son Khan in 1612 and son Wei in 1614. You two only know that you were born into a scholar-official family. You've grown up in comfortable quarters, enjoyed adequate food and clothing, and scarcely tasted distress or pain. Little did you know that your mother had to battle poverty, illness, and fatigue to keep the family from going adrift. For 26 years, I persevered as if it were only one day. Fortunately, my children are now grown up and duly married. Finally able to pass on my heavy responsibilities, I feel slightly relieved. Intent on achieving unity through division, I am separating you, my 2 sons, into 2 branches so that you can each tend to your family affairs. I would have been happy to keep shouldering the burden alone so that you can relax and so that our ancestors' deeds can be emulated. But what I have observed has led me to think otherwise. People have often preached the propriety of housing 9 generations under one roof. It is also true that both brothers are filial and equally known for their virtue. But even those who are one in sentiments often part ways in their handling of practical matters. Some are generous, others frugal. Some prefer abundance, others meagerness. People have incompatible likes and dislikes. The similarities and differences in human feelings can take many forms. How can I expect to always get what I want? Moreover, it is human nature that when people have been together for a long time, that they tend to slacken in behavior, which easily breeds disdain. Hence, when people are apart, they tend to be united. When they are together, they want to go separate ways. One has to discern the forces that draw distant people together and the forces that tear intimate people apart. I am glad that both my daughters-in-laws are virtuous and wise. Frugal and restrained, they abide by the teachings of the ancestors. Before I advance in years and run out of energy, I wish to clearly divide up every item of family property. You will now know just how difficult it has been to provide for this family and how taxing the ways of the world have been. You will establish yourselves on your own so that each of you will gradually ascend to the gateways of propriety and righteousness. Then the family will not be weakened by internal strife, nor will it be threatened by permanent extinction. Why should unity be held up as the only desirable goal? Every fiber and every grain that this family owns are the fruits of my industry and hardship over several decades. Preserve and magnify them. These are the high hopes I have for my two sons.
So the next woman we are meeting is Ning Lao Tai Tai. Ning Lao Tai Tai was a Chinese peasant who told her life experiences to Ida Prit. Ida Prit was an American woman who was born into a missionary family, grew up in China, and became a bicultural, bilingual social worker and author and translator. So Ning Lao Tai Tai was born in a small town in the eastern province of Shandong. Her father provided the family by selling baked goods, small business. Ning Lao Tai Tai's feet were bound to keep them small according to the custom of the time. At 15 again, she was married through a arranged marriage to an opium addict who sold all family possessions to sustain his own habit. So to support her family, Ning Lao Tai Tai began begging. Her husband even sold one of her daughters, so she left him, and then became a maid servant to support herself and also her other daughter. She worked in many Chinese families and also worked as a nanny at a local American missionary's home. So later she became a peddler. Several years after this, Ning Lao Tai Tai moved back with her husband, who had quitted his habit. And she gave birth to a son when her husband was at the age of 54. So she taught Prit the story during the 1930s when she moved in with her son to Beijing. So let's welcome Natasha Aquino to render Ning Lao Tai Tai's narrative into her performance.
Another Bible woman, old Madame Chu, always said to me, "Believe and you will go to heaven. Do not believe and you will go to hell." She said that heaven is a beautiful place with streets of gold and that hell is a place of torment where there are fire and worms. My little son said, "Is not Madame Chu wonderful? She has been to heaven and she has been to hell." Such is the heart of a child. And some said that in heaven each one is given a crown. For each person that they convert, they get a gem in the crown. With no gem, there is no seat for them in the assembly of the great. Is that why each one is so anxious to convert others? Most of the converts and missionaries talk such nonsense that I could reply to them. When my old man died, Mrs. Jones, for whom I sewed occasionally by the day, begged me to believe in the Heavenly Father. "But I do believe in the Heavenly Father," I said. "I have always done so. We Chinese also believe in him and burn incense to him in the temples and in our homes. But I cannot join your church." And she pressed me for reasons. "There are 3, I said. "First, I cannot keep the Sabbath. I must work each day that we may eat each day." "How much do you earn in the day of peddling?" she asked. Thinking she might want to offer me the sum so that I could go to church, I said quickly, "Also, in your religion, one must tell the truth." "I cannot tell the truth. In business, we cannot tell the truth. I am lying. If I have bought an article for 3 cash, I must say I have bought it for 4. I must make my profit. How could I sell anything at all if I did not tell them that I was selling at cost price to them alone? So I was able to outtalk her. But I could not outtalk my landlady, Mrs. Chang. She was more intelligent and had a better education than the other Bible women. She said that it was in one's heart and in one's life that counted. She said that one could believe and still be lost if one's heart was no good. I believed what she said, but could see no reason for changing my religion and becoming baptized. I saw around me those that were baptized and those that were not. There did not seem to me to be any difference in their characters or their actions. The ones that were baptized were on the payroll of the church, and the others were not. That was all the difference that I could see. Penglai City and the county were both very conservative. There was a Christian church there, but those who had a home and food to eat did not join it. The members of the church were mostly from the poorer parts of Hongshan County and from Qixia and Qimi, which were poor cities and poor hilly counties. When the crops failed and there was no food, it was convenient to believe. The doctrines of the Christian religion are good enough, but those who profess do not practice them. They say one thing and do another. And what do we know of the next world? What the Chinese religion promises is as good as what the Christian religion promises. How do we know which one is right?
The last voice is from a female physician, a hidden advocate, and a reformer, Zheng Yi. Zheng Yi was born into a scholar official family in 1852. Her mother was a famous painter of the region. Her older brother represented Zheng Yi as a young prodigy, whose talent constantly won their father's applause, and who spent days and nights exploring families' collections of books. Zheng's father died when she was 10 years old, and her mother took Zheng Yi and her siblings back to her mother's hometown, Chengdu, in the southwestern province of Sichuan. There, Zheng Yi learned from her mother a wide range of subjects and skills, including poetry writing, calligraphy, painting, needlework, history, and the classics. At the age of 15, Zheng, now married, started to suffer from an illness that lasted for 5 years. Because of this experience, she developed a strong interest in medicine. For the next 30-some years, she read broadly in medical works and primarily through self-training, achieved the status of a medical expert. She was married to her cousin and gave birth to 7 sons and 2 daughters. She published widely, including 4 volumes of poetry and 2 treatises on medicine and women's learning, respectively. In her later years, she contacted reformist officials. From there, in response to the political and national crisis of her time, she incorporated her medical expertise into her redefinition of female roles. So let's welcome Bella Azali to read a passage from Zheng Yi's book titled Treatise on Women's Learning.
Foot binding poses a huge obstacle to women's freedom, and its harm is even greater than floods and fierce brutes. In recent years, societies promoting natural feet emerged in metropolises, and yet only 30% of women follow these societies' advice to unbind their feet, and 70% of women did not. Why are the great majority of women so hard on themselves? This perplexes me indeed. I remember that, in my childhood, I saw my brothers coming home from school in late afternoons. They ran around to catch butterflies and look for flowers, enjoying unbounded freedom. I, by contrast, felt that my body was burdened by a tremendously heavy load and that my feet were in fetters. I always touched my feet and wept. Those moments are still vivid in my mind, and I cannot even imagine the torture again. With the reforms going on in China today, I am truly happy to see that women can be free from this torture from now on. Those who have already bound their feet should unbind their feet immediately. Even for the really tiny bound feet, there are still ways to let them grow bigger if truly desired. Gradually, switch to larger sizes of stockings and shoes, every time to 1 or 2 fen bigger, and make the tips of the shoes in the round rather than the pointed shape. Then, in 1 year, the feet will grow 1 or 2 inches, and in 2 years, they will grow back to normal sizes. What would be the benefits of freeing the bound feet? Women would have the ease in walking and in digesting food, and the hepatic energy disease common among Chinese women can be prevented. This is called the benefit of protecting the body. Being healthy and energetic, women can bear the burden of hard work and thus perform their household duties. This is called the benefit of managing the household. Bearing sons and daughters who are robust and strong in blood, women can make the race prosper day by day. This is called the benefit of strengthening the nation. With these 3 benefits, our 200 million women who are normally seen as toys will all turn into useful citizens. This would not only be good fortune for us women, but also great fortune for China's future.
Let's thank our 3 wonderful actors one more time. So let's open the floor for some questions and perhaps conversation. Yes, and I will be like a talk show host.
My question is for each of you, so answer in whatever order you prefer. I'm wondering what about your passages touched you the most?
Yeah, so what about these passages touched me the most? I am a theater minor, and I think something that you don't get asked to do often is read something like that actually makes sense to you and like something that you can relate to. Maybe it's just because I'm Asian American, and I don't know, I got an email from Kevin, and he was like, hey, are you free? Would you like to do this thing? It's starting off Women's History Month, and it's about the women's voices of like Imperial China. And I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to get asked that ever again. I was like, yeah, why not?
Good.
And so when we were reading through the script, he was just like, think about like who she is and like what does this mean to like be the matriarch of like a Chinese family back then. And I was like, this is great. And I was really excited when he like gave me the offer, and just reading through this, I got really excited too. More so just like, wow, it's like something I understand, and it's like, like Khan and Wei, like Asian names, like whoa, that never happens. What? I don't want to say too much, but you guys.
Thank you. I feel like in my passage, the one thing that touched me the most was the fact that everybody just tried to get her so hard to believe in Christianity, especially when I always have a hard time with like having the thought that anybody that is such a good person but doesn't believe in Christianity is going to automatically go to hell. I hate that thought so much. And so there's like in such a diverse community where you know people from like such different religions, I'm like, see, I'm gonna probably go to hell for it, but I'm not gonna believe that. So I feel like, yeah, like the one thing that touches me is that like she understands that you don't have to
follow the preachings of a particular religion to be a good person or to like get on with life. Like normally we use religion as like to turn to something for comfort, and she like knows that you can do the same thing and it doesn't have to be like the one religion that people are trying to press upon it. So yeah, that's one thing that definitely got me for this passage.
For this one, I think that Sangi knew what she was talking about. Like, she was very intelligent, obviously. And for those of you who don't know what foot binding necessarily is, it's back in Imperial China. They wanted women's feet to be small like lotuses because it was desirable and it was their attractive feature back then. And what they would do when they were really young is they would bend small girls' feet in half and wrap it with ribbons and like wraps until it took that shape. And it's extremely painful and it's excruciating. And this was a common practice and it was normal. And if you didn't, and like it was a 50-50 toss-up whether or not your feet stayed like that. And if it didn't, like your feet were broken and you stayed ugly. And so the fact that she's advocating for, especially in front of men, to say like, hey, stop looking at women as just these toys. There's so much more than that. And the way that she has to advocate it is to say that they're useful citizens, because that's the only way she can get rid of these men, is very intelligent in a way that she knows her audience and she knows the only way to appeal to them is to appeal to another side that they like.
Thank you. That was
wonderful.
Very good.
Another question? Oh, I'm gonna go to front and then back.
Oh yeah, what were the eras for each different women again?
When that
Like
What time?
yeah, the time period that they were doing and stuff.
I can answer. So the first one, the first lady, is from 17th century, and so the other two from 19th century.
The 19th
19th century. Yes. Yeah, the last one actually, her piece came out in 1907, so it's almost the very end of the Imperial period. So that was the year Treatise on Women's Learning was published.
Thank you for the excellent performance. I have a question to any one of you. What are the similarities that you can see right now between you as an average Asian American woman and the woman back then? Do you see any similarity?
Yeah. There are so many similarities. I mean, even in like the practical fact that we're all Asian American women now, and that there aren't many opportunities for us to explain our truths and our stories. Much like these women back then, that you had to be educated. And even your letter, she didn't even write it herself because she was illiterate. She had to have another woman who was given the opportunity to have an education to write it. And the fact that these women, and probably us today, will not get many opportunities, and we have to fight for it. And that's very similar in common.
I'll just add, I think, yeah, similar to what you said, that all these women are like very, very strong and very strong-willed. Like, for example, Gu, she challenges or tries to challenge like what is done back then. Like she's talking about splitting up the family so that it'll like the inheritance will go to her two sons, and like she's the matriarch. And I feel like just being Asian American women in this industry, it's like really hard, and you always have to like find unconventional ways to, you know, get what you want across, because a lot of the times Asian American women in entertainment, that says it all. It's like, and it's just, if you want something, you have to fight for it, you have to assert it. And I feel like, especially with Gu, her character, just her being, she's very assertive, and just who she is very strong as a person. Like, she's not asking her sons what they want to do. She's telling them this is what's going to happen. And just being an Asian American in the United States, there's already a lot of like ideas that, you know, Asian American women are submissive and docile, as like prevalent in the back in the days. You know, they're submissive and victims, and I just hate that stereotype so much. It's crazy.
No Asian mom is like that.
Yeah. So I guess
I mean, the one similarity I've seen through all of these letters and like Asian American women in general is that they know how to hustle. I love that because they understand like their position and they know it's at a disadvantage, so they have to find like a different way to beat the system while knowing how to work the system so like no one catches them way too early to put them down or tear them apart, and they can actually achieve the things that they want in life or know how to survive, especially because my character is a peddler. All that she wanted was to like secure a day-to-day like future for her son, and she's gone through so much pain, and to me I find that they're so strong in that way that they can just keep on moving on and not be defeated by how hard their circumstances are. So looking like even now, I'm surrounded by so many people that like know how to persevere in the face of like so much adversity, and I really respect that.
Okay. Were you the one who ended up married to the opium addict?
Me?
You. Okay. Sorry. I've had a lot going on. Okay. So, what do you think about the choices that your character made?
I feel like she just had to do what she had to do, because if you are illiterate and you don't come from a social setting family, which means no connections, you have to do at least like the bare minimum to survive. And plus you're taking care of a child, you had one sold off. Like if you're a mother, you're gonna think about that every day. So I feel like I've known people like that, and I understand that sometimes it's unconventional, the things that you have to do to survive, and like other people would think that's like unthinkable to have like to be living in such a standard. So to me, I just respect that she was able to go so far and move on, even like have the strength to like go back with her husband just to do that. So I think she's like a pretty like powerful and strong woman, even in her own regard, despite her circumstances.
I think so too. I mean, what is the good choice when you have to sell your child? But she kept going. I'm so bowled over by that. Thank you.
I think when you said these women know how to hustle, you spoke what was on my mind, that they all three knew how to navigate their environments and used really big picture arguments to do so. This is good for the country. Some pretty insightful philosophizing about religion, and I know how people behave, so I'm going to take care of things. And that's all huge. I have a question about Matriarch Gu for Professor Wang, because with so many of these voices, I'm always wanting to know what happened to the rest of the story. So I'm wondering about some context for that extraordinary letter that she wrote, and whether this was a very unusual step for a woman to take, or for anyone to divide property like this in those times. And do we know how her sons responded to this letter? I'd love to know.
So people divided family properties, but for we have to set this context into to think about family, how to envision a family into China. So family was such a central consideration of a Confucian society, it was regarded as the core unit of the society, as the microcosm of the society. The well-being of family really reflects the well-being of the society. So, as Gu mentioned in her letter, so 9 generations living under one roof is considered to be a sign of the unity and prosperity of the family, and to extend to the societal level. If many families live in this way, in a harmonious and orderly way, it's considered as a sign of the prosperity of the society. So by dividing family apart, people do, however, is not a good, it does not support a Confucian ideal that much. And also it involves a lot of argumentations and emotional strains among the family members. So I think the decision she made was very radical, and it's also very practical. She mentioned a lot of practical reasons why she wanted to divide the family property. So if we think about the importance of family and importance of big family, so her step was very revolutionary. Honestly, I don't know what was the response of her 2 sons, but we do know that she included this letter in particular. Think about it. She could just tell the son that I want to divide the family property because I earned it. But she wrote a letter, and she included that into the collection of her works. That means she wanted this letter to be passed down to later generations of the family, to show that because she earned everything, she had the authority to divide it up. I guess her authority comes from that she is the one that really leads the family.
Great, thank you.
Considering how women are being treated in our present society, I know that a lot of advancement has happened. But I'm thinking, like, before this past century, I feel like there have been very few women who have been represented. Like, there have been very few women who had a voice. And I'm wondering, were women in China more liberal than the Western world or the rest of the world in general? Or was the picture the same? Like it has been all over the world.
So your question was,
good
were
question.
women in China more liberal than those in the West? I think we're trying to see the strategies these women, the intelligence, the strategies these women use within the confines, the social confines. They're not liberal. They have to on their feet, and they were not allowed to take civil service examination to be part of the official system. In that sense, they were still confined. But we are trying to see their agency, their subjectivity, even within this very restricted patriarchal system. It's hard really to compare who is freer, who is more liberated. We have to still put those into context. And you mentioned we hear little voices, right, of women in modern time. It has also had to do the availability of their voices, the literacy rate of women, and how. So starting from when they could write, and starting from what time their work could be published, so that we could get a copy of their work, right, to read. But absolutely, they have voices, but the voices we could hear depends on their writing skills and the publishing, right, the material we could get. That's the question.
Sorry, another question.
Cynthia's going for a second.
I am. Okay, again for Professor Wang, I'd love some more context now for the reformer. We know that, speaking of the West and the East comparisons, that with the rise of medicine and scientific argument in the 19th century, a lot of male doctors used that scientific knowledge to keep women down, to say that their mental faculties physiologically could not sustain literacy or education or things like that. And so I was wondering, with the arguments that she was making against foot binding, what were her male counterparts? Were they actually using science to, she's making points of health here. What was the general thought, whether it's in the medical profession or society at large at that time, about the healthfulness of that practice?
All right, thank you for this question. Actually, I think Zheng Yi was was engaging in the debate between whether women were constitutionally different in terms of their body, or their illness is more socially produced. Right. So some male physicians at the time argue that women's body were constructed differently. So their illness was a product of their body issue, the body per se. But here, by referring to foot binding, this practice, Zheng Yi is trying to bring this social approach to women's illness. It's because their feet were bounded. They could not exercise. They could not get fresh air. So they are more susceptible to illness. Contract the illnesses caused by the dysfunction of liver. That's because, so in Chinese we call that, so women's illness is because of their pent-up emotions, because they cannot get out, cannot communicate with the outside world. So she provided a very social approach to women's body and women's health. I think that's something very different.
I guess I have a comment on Zheng Yi's as a reformer, not necessarily related to foot binding, because I got really into it as I was working with Dr. Wang for this program. When Zheng Yi was writing about this, it was the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, and at the time we are entering into the idea of feminism, of whether reformism was happening, and people have different ideas what reforms were supposed to mean. Some would say, "Oh, reject all the tradition," and others said, "No, tradition's good." And those who rejected tradition completely, we said, "Okay, we're gonna go for the Western idea of free marriage and independence and liberation and kind of slogans." Whereas Zheng Yi's approach is actually kind of like a middle path, if I can use that in this context, that she's trying to build up on the knowledge and skills that women already have, and within the tradition, instead of breaking completely, but building up on the tradition and empowering women within what they already are familiar with, and basically giving agency, like Dr. Wang mentioned, to empower women that they have had in the past, to recognize that. And so I thought it was kind of refreshing.
Yeah, she talk about the women's role as housewives, right? So that you can, with unbound feet, you can better, manage the household. You can produce healthy, robust sons, and then you can, contribute to the strengthening of the nation. So still from women's role as a domestic housekeeper to the contributor to the nation building project.
Any other questions or comments? Do you want to ask what?
I'm so curious about, I heard the performers, reflection on their connection with the narratives. I'm curious about the audience. How do you react to these narratives? Anything you found interesting, surprising?
So, as a mother of 2 sons, I'm now thinking, what am I going to do? I could really relate to that, and I'm also one of 2 children, so there's a whole story there that we don't have time for tonight. So I could really relate to that. I could relate to that whole thing. The idea of selling a child is, it's Sophie's Choice, the saddest movie I ever saw in my life, where she had to, just so horrifying. So that really resonated with me. And then I was so excited to learn that
you were a published author, and had 9 children. How you did that? I want to know you. I would time travel to have a lunch or extended dinner, to learn about that, because I had trouble just having 2 children and a life. So I just find all 3 voices really amazing, and I wish that I could know them.
Yeah, I think in the case of the maid character, it was really interesting how her situation developed, from being like, oh, well, you got to take care of the family while the husband is sick, and then the husband is dead.
Yeah.
And then the father-in-law said, well, all right, I guess you're in charge of the business now, like, go take over.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's probably not something that would be permitted normally. Maybe it would be like a son would do it, but I guess just the special circumstances would prevent a son from taking over, and so it was just her only choice.
Yeah. But at the time, also a lot of female teachers, right? She was also a teacher, right? Not only teacher her own sons, but also the daughters in the larger family, right? Extended family of her natal family. So at that time, there was a profession as female teachers circulating among those elite and wealthy families. They did teach.
Working hard for the change you want to see in your life, and also with a sense of urgency is what I really respected about your readings and the women in the history first story. I really appreciate that that experience. But as people, I just feel like everyone should have like that same mindset with a sense of accuracy and like working hard for what they want. And if there's something that they don't like about the environment, just reacting to that with a fight. I really appreciate that.
I feel that the problems that these 3 women were facing are so relevant even right now, and like there are still problems that we all as a society are facing, and I think we are not probably foot binding women right now, but we are still binding women with other things, and we are still doing a lot of other things that are like that might not be considered modern in the sense. But I feel like they're still like all these 3 stories are still relevant in today's time, and you can still relate to them and still feel something about our own present condition.
Appreciate that. The relevance, right, of these pre-modern women into this modern world.
I know that you have a large pool of late Imperial women. Speaking of the voice, right? I just wonder, those Imperial women like the Empress Dowager Cixi.
Yes, Cixi, yeah.
So, is there any problem or is there any issues of not if we pick her voice? And she's very prominent.
Oh, thank you. Right? Okay, we should have included her. Very powerful woman till the very end of the Qing dynasty, the last Imperial dynasty in China. So it has to do how we selected these narratives. We wanted the voice to be situated in the everyday life of women, and that they're making decisions in their own situations. You see that common women. So Cixi, in the highest of high, she's constantly making decisions. Her agency is very obvious. But for common, women from ordinary families, how do they make decisions? How do they think? We want to find these women as thinking beings, as thinking subjects. So that's one of the criteria when I decided on this year's event. Perhaps in our future events, we can include more powerful women such as Cixi and Empress Wu from the Tang Dynasty, the first female empress in entire Chinese history today. Yeah. Do you want to add? Because Rachel really did an excellent job in collecting primary sources. Yeah, she might want to share some of her insights.
Like what you said, it's about looking at the ordinary to discover the extraordinary in our everyday life. Actually, when I first started the conversation, we were really big. We were ambitious. We're going to cover whole Asia, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam. We got a lot of
Yes, and it's going to be a
material
panel
from
of 14 or something. Of course, we hope that in the future events of Women's Voices series, that there will be different voices represented. And I feel part of the selections, yes, they were obviously a lot of women from late Imperial China. Part of the difficulty is whether the materials are available in translation. In fact, say Gu's letter, which was published, I believe, on 1 or 2 limited copies. One one is housed in the library in Japan, another one was, I think, more recently found in China. So to discover these women's narratives and then have scholars to translate them and make them available. So it took a little bit of digging. You know, I work in archives and special collections. We have some letters, and they are already in English and written by, great American women of the West. And when you go out of the English language, it becomes a little bit more challenging. Yeah, so that is part of the criteria, that kind of by situation, I suppose.
Yeah, so women should, and also these women should be able to write, so that we can get to see their words and their voices. Next time. Okay, we do want to say that all these material actually found through our library. Our library is wonderful. So yeah, there's such a large collection. Please, yeah, when you do your research, please use our library.
Yeah, if not necessarily letters, would there also be songs or poetry by women from China?
Yeah, that would be a lot, right?
Yeah. There are a lot of, in fact, poetries and songs and plays.
Yeah.
More creative writing, fictional writing. For this particular event, we're trying to get the personal narrative that is non-fictional and also something that brings the experience to life. We would love to have another program for poetry reading. Something of that nature another time again. So yeah, there are plenty of that. In fact, they're more available than, say, their personal narratives. Yeah. Any other comments? Okay, looks like we are reaching the end of the program. Let's thank our 3 actresses. Natasha Aquino and Isabel Azali. I hope I pronounced all of your names correctly. Many thanks to Professor Yanjie Wang and Professor Kevin Wetmore for directing the program. Hold on, I'm coming. Yes, I'm unforgettable. And also, most importantly, thank you to every one of you for attending tonight's event. There's no event without you. It sounds very cheesy, but it's true. And I hope now that the Women's Voices is also among your personal favorites. And we would love to hear what you think about the event. So please take a moment to fill out a very short feedback form. And you may enter to win a raffle of $100 Amazon card. And if that is not enough, when you drop off that feedback form in that box over there, you may take a little souvenir of this beautiful event flyer. In fact, it's created by our student designer, Heather Pilkington. And so enjoy, and thank you so much for coming again. Hope to see you around. Thank you.